Hello, everybody, for this another episode. So we're doing the panel today, and I want to, say thank you all of you to join here today, and so welcome to this another episode of podcast, The Future of Web. The core idea about Future of Web was to kind of bring a lot of founders, creators, right? Developers, designers, community managers, anyone who's building anything in Web3 to bring on the podcast, come and talk about how their product or service is solving a certain challenge, right? Within this, I started this initiative about a week, 10 days back called the Metaverse Marathon, again, where we kind of took up one project every day, showcase again, what they're building because Metaverse is still not out of the picture. And based on that, we showcased a lot of products, fantastic use cases. You can see earlier episodes for that. So today what we're doing is we're talking about Metaverse, obviously, because that's the marathon is called Metaverse Marathon, but with AI and its challenges, right? So good evening, good morning, good afternoon from wherever you're joining. My name is Alek. I am the host of the show and the founder of Animo Solution, which is a Web3 focused design development agency. And to go on with the show, we have a stellar panel today. I'm going to start introducing them. First, a little talk, what we're going to talk about. So, we're going to primarily talk about, a metaverse, which is a rapidly evolving technology and obviously has a potential to revolutionize how how we live, how we work, and how we play, and several other things. But as with any new technology, there are challenges. So we're going to address those challenges through this panel, about data privacy, security, safety and moderation, accessibility, adoption, regulation, and several some other points as well. Right. So let's. I think it's time now to bring in. We have a lot to talk about. I'm just trying to make sure things are a little quickly. So first, we'll welcome Dr. Christina. So Christina is a metaverse pioneer. She started a master research on the topic in 2006. That's the amount of experience that she's carrying to develop universities' international strategies. In 2012, with full scholarship, she completed a PhD in using digital twin in metaverse to augment the AEC industry. Christina is an award-winning business leader with 17 years of experience turning forward-thinking ideas into high-growth businesses. She obviously has an extensive experience of working with different governments, universities, businesses on innovation strategies. She has sat on 20 plus advisory committees for UNESCO, World Bank, Commonwealth, EU, and UK governments. She is a vice chair of the UN International Telecommunication Union Metaverse Working Group on Sustainability, Accessibility, and Inclusion. She also sits on Tech UK's Digital Twins Board and Advisory Council of International Science Council on the Future of Science. Ooh, what a stellar accomplishment, and not done yet. She also chairs a weekly Twitter space discussion with experts on pragmatic use of metaverse across industries, which is promoted to a global community of 100,000 plus leaders. So let's go ahead and welcome Christina. Hello,
Hi,
Christina.
everyone.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a really great pleasure to be here today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming in. Let me just introduce our other panelists, and then we'll deep dive, into our discussion. We already have so many questions and comments coming in, right? So our next guest is Aditya Mani, who is a founder of a company called Hologram Style. It's a direct-to-wear platform where consumers can style their avatars with branded wearables and share immersive stories to social. He has taken a keen interest in showcasing digital fashion on avatars, again, both brand ambassadors as avatars and consumer avatars. He's an advisor in AIXR for the retail industry focus and also on the advisory board of Metaverse Standards Forum. Keenly looking at the digital fashion world from the lens of AR, again, body tracking, metaverse persistence embodiments on avatars, and 3D commerce as well as playable commerce, which is showcasing fashion in gaming platforms. So Aditya is also on the advisory board of the Metaverse Fashion Council. So let's go ahead and welcome Aditya Mani. Hi Aditya, thank you so
Hi,
much.
thanks for having me, Malik. Always a pleasure.
Pleasure. It's always great to talk to you and Christina and Dennis as well. So our third guest, Dennis Robert Fantasny, So Dennis onboards enterprises into the metaverse that are looking to have high resolution experience for their customers. He excels at creating high quality content in pencil stroke quality with the help of Unreal Engine 5, which is the latest in the video game graphics. Creating POAP NFTs, that's POAP, POAP, proof of attendance protocol, is one of the straightforward and low tech solutions he offers for people entering the NFT space. His passion for exploring the intersection of technology and creativity drives him. Let us go ahead and welcome Dennis as well. Hello, Dennis.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Pleasure to have all of you here. Thank you so much for coming in. And we already have tons of questions and interest from people coming in and comments. Let's start with. So I'll start with you, Christina. As our panel today is primarily about the metaverse AI and its challenges, right? So from your perspective, you've been you have a stellar career. You're involved in so many different aspects and avenues from government to companies. So what do you think are the core challenges that with metaverse and AI?
I think at this moment we are talking about several key area of challenges. So the first one will be the IT infrastructure, because in really to unleash the full potential of AI and the metaverse, according to Intel, we need at least 1,000 times more computing power. And currently we don't have that computing power. How do we address it? That's the first thing. And the second thing is when we really want to utilize like metaverse, we need super connectivity on global scale.
Mm-hmm.
So currently, a lot of area around the world, we are still suffering a massive digital divide. So out of 8 billion population, we still have 3 billion people offline, so they're not connected to the internet. How can we
Mm-hmm.
ensure when the developing countries are like suffering from the digital connectivity? How can we help them to ensure they don't falling behind? And the third area, I think there is a lot of issues about ethical consideration when we
Mm-hmm.
advance technology. And I think that's particularly the case when it comes to AI. Everyone remembers when the sensational resignation from godfather of AI, Dr. Geoffrey Hinton, resigned.
Yes.
It really shocked the whole world. And I think there are three major reasons he resigned. The first reason is he's worried that AI is going to create massive amounts of fake news, which becomes difficult to manage. And the second area is actually a lot of automation will cause mass employment issues, not only on lower skilled jobs, but also increasingly on very highly educated and professional jobs. And the
Mm-hmm.
third area is particularly worry is we humans are not really ready for a society where the intelligence of machine exceeds the intelligence of humans. That's called
Mm-hmm.
technical singularity. So there is massive ethical issues need to be addressed. And of course, there is energy consumption issue because AI and the simulation of massive like a digital twin around the world is not really environmentally. How can we really make a balance to ensure any kind of advances we have in the technologies will really help to have a sustainable future for our planet? But I can continue, and I want to share the stage with our two other distinguished panel. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Christina. I think you've raised very good, very valid points. So I'll go to Dennis on this, because he's, majorly into digital twins and, big manufacturing units converting into digital twins and everything. So, Dennis, how do you see this as a challenge? Because it's going to be a lot of infrastructure requirement, one, and then heavy power consumption. So, how do you see this as a challenge? And, what is it that comes up in your discussions with industry leaders, when they want to create digital twins?
So it's kind of fascinating. I always try to have multiple departments in there. I always say like even though I focus on industrial metaverse, like because it's like kind of my passion, like we focus like we can serve any customer needs. But I think the marketing stuff is what we see, right? And it's not that sexy. Like the underlying technology, like actually enables industry 4.0. to be visualized in a 3D rendered environment. And this is what is actually giving a lot of value right now. The problem we have is, why are we doing this? Where's the ROI? In industrial solutions, you can actually tell people where the ROI is and why they should invest. And then when you talk to them, it's always like, hey, what kind of quality do we need, etc. Like, how much computing power is this? Do we need to hyperscale this with Amazon, IBM, etc.? Do we have our own app? These are questions that they have to ask themselves. Like, how do you want to work together? Like, if you want to work with anyone, then you need to use hyperscalers and a lot of computing power that is external by nature, because you have to use cloud computing, right? If you keep everything internally, hey, no problem. You can use an app. You can be on like smart devices. You can have a designated iPad or whatever, designated AR headset, whatever you want to use, and then you keep that like internally. I think the computational power, whether you use an iPad or GPU that you rent out, is probably the same, right? Like, so whatever we use, we're going to run into this heavy use of energy consumption. So yeah, like Christina just said, like, hey, wherever we go, whichever way we slice and dice it, it's going to be a problem.
Exactly. So here I want to take Aditya's point, right? Because he's at the heart of fashion, right? And as well as in metaverse. So fashion in itself has been very, very resource intensive industry. Like we've heard it many times that a good pair of jeans takes so much water to consume. Like I'm not going in the side, but it's just a resource intensive industry, right? So how do you see, Aditya, these two worlds coming together in one way? Because you have, as it is, fashion in itself takes a lot of energy, just to produce and with everything else, and now getting into digital twins, because there are fashion houses which are turning and creating their actual stores into online presence like metaverse stores for a different experience to engage with customers. Where do you see this going?
Yeah, I see positive because I say one thing that Gen Z wants to uh, have the latest and greatest, partially because they want to feel good, partially also because it helps them connect with their tribe. So if they're wearing the latest fashion, it helps them be a part of a larger, fraternity. So if you're able to do the same with digital fashion without having to consume physical fashion, it's a little less strain on the environment. And then the other positive is if you look at some of the fashion houses like Shein, what they've done is they've actually done very small, orders, and depending on, which are the posts and which are the kind of, items which are getting that accelerated growth, then they go and reorder more from the factory. So they're truly leveraging technology and leveraging the power of what AI can do in terms of forecasting, and then calling for more production rather than overproduce, send it out there. If it doesn't sell, it's fast fashion, just move it to a landfill. So I feel that that kind of sensitivity on seeing what is it that the consumer is really looking at, whether it's in terms of having the eye tracking present inside the VR headset, which actually gives you an idea on what you're really looking at and what's grabbing your attention, to actually which page you're on while you're scrolling away. That's the kind of feedback that AI can give back at mass scale. So it can give it, you can have data mined from 2 million people overnight without having to go through a manual statistics. And that's the power of what AI can do in terms of, getting you that feedback in terms of consumer. And, all of it is going to work with all the existing technology that we have, whether it's generative or regular AI. We're going to be, utilizing all of that in digital fashion as well.
I think great point, and I think this can lead us to a different conversation as well, where I want to see, like all three of you, probably start with Christina again, that Aditya, you mentioned about, with eye tracking and all those. So what are the ethical implications? How do you see that going there? Because we are talking about a lot of data being mismanaged by these conglomerates, these businesses. And that was one reason for Web3 to kind of take a little flight, because we were talking about, immutability, data security, privacy, and now we are tracking eyeballs, right? And all the governmental cards, like here we have Aadhaar and different Every country has different country wise cards, which is kind of your identity, right? And when people are tracking your eyes and stuff, I mean that's yeah, I mean you used to see that in sci-fi movies, right? That if you want to go and unlock a door or something, you have to kind of scan your eyes. And now here we are willingly giving that information to companies, right? Everybody says it's secured and everything, but you keep hearing hacks. How do you see that going, Christina, going forward? Because that's I see as a major challenge.
I think, based on my experience dealing with different United Nations agencies and governments,
Hmm.
the privacy and data security is a top priority. And we start to talk about human-centered digital future of any kind of front, whether it's come to AI or come to Web3 or come to Metaverse. How can we really put the well-being and better future of humanity at everything we are doing when it comes to digital is getting more and more attention worldwide. So when it comes to specifically on the issue about privacy and data protection,
Hmm.
governments they are looking at different legislation. In the EU, we have the EU AI Act, and in the UK, they are looking at setting up like new measurement to ensure data security when it comes to AI. And of course, in other part of the world, I remember when there has been like serious breach or potential data leak by very like tech company, the government pretty much chipping in very quickly. So I guess is how we can educate regulators to ensure whatever kind of policy they put forward will create a really efficient safeguarding measures
Hmm.
that will be balanced. So it's not too harsh to stop the innovation to
Hmm.
put forward at scale, but also at the same time, we want to ensure like safety, for example, for our children. So there
Hmm.
has been a really excellent report released by UNESCO, UNICEF recently on how to ensure metaverse is safe for children, which is highly commendable. And of course, I think this kind of invasive technology is perhaps going to be more and more prevalent worldwide. I also want to bring everyone's attention to the recent announcement from Elon Musk. He has a very advanced company called the Neuralink. So the idea is to have an invasive computer chip put inside your brain, and so he has been mainly using that for medical purpose to start with. So he's hoping that by providing a chip inside the brain, it will help the brain to remedy any like function which are already lost as a result of accident or medical conditions. So he wants to bring vision back to people who are blind or people who has lost the ability to move around, or as a result of aging society, there are also people who cannot remember their own family, which are really sad as a result of like Parkinson's disease or Alzheimer. So he's working on that. But there are like recent announcement by FDA. So his Neuralink company has been approved to start human trial, which for a lot of people is hugely, hugely controversial and sensitive. But I guess when we're talking about medical application, a lot of people see huge hope in that. So maybe I think we need to have a combination of balanced approach on medical purpose as well as general purpose moving forward. Thank you.
I think thank you for that point, but it's a valid point that it's because of technological advancements. A lot of things have become for the better. Let's take example of mobile phones. As simple as that, right? Earlier we used to have dial-in phones where which were wired to a wall and stuff like that. And because of technological advancements, being satellites and other things, we have all this. So what happens is, what I understand is, with every technological advancement, there is a concern for privacy, security, right? I mean, they go hand in hand. And you made a valid point where we need to have a balance so that the innovation is not stifled, right? Whereas we take care of this concerns about people privacy, and there are several other things, impersonation. And now we're coming to uh, digital twins of humans, right? So they can be another Alec as a digital twin, right? Here that I want to take your input, because how do you see that? So you could be interacting with not the the real Alec who's there on this chat hosting this panel, but a digital part of me. To some extent it sounds fun, that you can do maybe several other things. The monotonous work can be given to the digital. But what about, again, the control? I could be used for different other negative purposes as well, right? Aditya, your take, and then we'll go to Dennis.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's valid. And building on what Christina said, we have to basically readdress entire GDPR based on, now data is going to come from sensors. Data is going to come in from different kinds of sensors. And then there's a role not just for aggregators, there's a
Mm-hmm.
role for AIs. Who owns the AI? Who owns the AI model? So sometimes
Mm-hmm.
people can come up to a legislator and say, hey, it's an open source model, it's not mine. But what about the data? So the
Yeah.
data is owned by a company privately. The source code is open source, but you're not releasing the data. So all of this is important from the citizens' point of view. It's important from the government's point of view, and especially what you said, right? So it's all fun and games when digital Aditya can host a podcast based on a
Yeah.
generated script by ChatGPT and can be spoken out by any of the AIs that can speak out my voice. It's fun and games. But tomorrow, if I can control a politician's face with my facial capture, and I can give any kind of message out there, that gets dangerous. Like we saw that happen during various campaigns where doctored images and doctored footage, which was basically easy VFX back in the day, but now it's easily possible with democratized AI. And also the whole point of what we're trying to do in our software is we don't let anyone upload a photograph and create a digital twin, because I need to have that person's consent. So what I've done is I said that unless you have a selfie, unless you take a selfie,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to be able to spin up a digital twin. So if you're close enough to me that I take your consent to take a selfie, that means I have your consent in some way. But even then, even something like that is not foolproof, because you could technically take a selfie of a photograph and the computer may not know that.
Yes.
So,
Exactly.
so, so these are the kind of things one needs to start thinking about, because when you're talking about social content, when you're talking about making, when I'm not an important figure and I'm making a fake Elon Musk come up with a fake, it doesn't matter. But in case I had malicious intent and I do something which is going to harm his stock price, then that's something which hits home hard. So I think that we need to be rethinking of GDPR and rethinking of it in terms of even the consequences, in terms of what will happen in case either a content aggregator or the platform or the owner of the ML model or the owner of the data of the ML model were to misuse anything, that there would be consequences, and we need to be responsible about that.
Fantastic. I think that's a valid point, right? And so, Christina, so this kind of come back to you because you have empaneled at so many other these institutions and governments, right? And one of the users also made a valid point here. So the person says that we need the experts to make the recommendations on how to regulate and not the policymakers. I think it comes really well. It's the chef that can tell you, how it can taste better and how you cannot, copy whatever, safeguard the recipe, and not the one who's just kind of consuming it. What do you think, Christina? And then we go to Dennis.
I think one of the really beautiful thing about modern technology is it will allow tens of millions of end users
Hmm.
who start to have a voice in very important decisions of our daily life when it comes to policy making. So I think we start to have a new form of public-private people partnership, PPPP. So 4P,
Okay.
which I think is really, really interesting because we, for example, there has been lots of discussion about how to use metaverse, digital twin, artificial intelligence, machine learning to support municipal government to build smart city of the future. And the key to ensure that success is how to, again, put the people's needs at the very center of everything we do.
Yes.
And then the future of the city can really flourish. There has already been lots of really interesting case studies worldwide. Perhaps one of the most prominent one is taking place in Saudi Arabia now, called
Hmm.
NEO. So the government put forward 500 billion US dollars to try to create the future of the city in a way which never happened before. But the most fascinating bit of how they are developing the whole thing is they use Metaverse AI digital twins. So they simulate the whole cities in the digital world, looking at healthcare, looking at education, looking at environment impact, looking at how to support small, medium-sized business to flourish, and etc. So all the key elements of the city, they simulate that and develop different scenarios and get it tested to choose the best possible way, and then they link that with real world using IoT, so it can be 24/7 optimization with the support of AI, which can be quite powerful. And using that, millions of citizens can actually using the sensors put in their smart home to connect
Okay.
with the central government database and say if there's any issues of the place they are living, they can actually send that information instantly back to the center of the smart city control, which I think can be quite powerful in the future. So imagine we can incorporate that for, we all have this kind of like wearables monitoring like our sleep patterns and how many steps we work each day and if we have burned enough calories
No, nothing. Yeah.
and we can all get that connected with the central
Oh yeah.
database of the
Yes.
of the government, and maybe they can say next year we need to put 10% of our budget into preventative healthcare for our citizens, and they are going to like extend their lifespan on average by 5%, and then that will be like really helpful. We can do the same. Maybe let's say in London area, for example, some of my friends live in central London, and the most important issue for them is the childcare. And then maybe the government can put more nurseries in certain parts based on the data connected, for our individual. So that's actually turning things around. But I agree with you. We need to figure it out how to ensure the safety of digital identity of individual citizens, but maybe replace that with more sophisticated digital identification. So it doesn't need to reveal anything that could violate GDPR in Europe or any kind of data privacy, but still allow governments, private business, and individual citizens to benefit from the technology without worrying too much about the privacy issue. So there are things we can do.
I think that's a valid point. But how would governments do that? See, the challenge is who's there to tell them, right? And I want to take in Dennis's point here because he's working in the realm of digital twins, right? So Dennis, I mean, do customers come and ask you that like we want to build the digital twin of this to to save us a lot of money, to future proof ourselves and stuff like that? But does anyone come and ask like what are the ethical implications of this? How do we
Uh,
safeguard the users? How do we take care of GDPR? Because you are sitting in the heart of Europe, right?
yeah. Actually, I think every customer wants all the data. So that's it.
Yes.
So I think everything you do with data and sensitive data, data is getting more and more sensitive. Like we're so close to getting like all the biometric data from everyone, right? So we should think about it. So by default, we don't collect any data. Like when we do anything on the platform, like the clients actually have to opt in, and then we have to check whether or not it's GDPR conform. Like I think every company should do that, just like to err on the side of caution, because data is so sensitive, and then you don't want to be like caught getting your hands stuck in the honeypot of data, and then say, oh yeah, I did something with somebody else's data, but it's just like it's just like a million children that I saw like in the metaverse, and I collected all their data and like their pictures or whatever. It's like like you don't really want to be in that situation. So like, hey, I think from a standpoint of data collection, just like by default you shouldn't collect. But I know like others don't. So like it's self-regulated, So I think I agree with everyone else. Like it should be regulated by law, because just because of the sensitivity. It's not your average. I got fished and my Facebook password got hacked, like from a few years ago. Like, no, everything is online. Like, you maybe you even your seed phrase to your online wallet. Like, yeah, you never know. And I think, Nicole, in the comments, she raised that question again. Like, it used to be pretty simple. We've been tracking a lot, and also we can look at the gaming industry. What are we already tracking, and what is pretty common? Like, basically, we've been tracking eyesight in games forever, and nobody ever had a problem with that. And if you know that games actually make their money from advertisements and not from the sales of stuff, then you know how much they track. And nobody ever had a problem with this. I think once we go to the next step and actually having digital personas, digital identities connected with everything, then I probably don't want to know that, other people to know that I'm running around in Fortnite for 10 hours, right? Like, nobody has the right to know that kind of stuff. So I don't know how we're going to solve that. Probably it's going to be a lot of regulation, and it needs to come fast because AI just like exploded, the timeline.
Absolutely, and I see the challenge with that is that like certain restrictive policies which could come in effect. Where they say that say somebody X is playing 10 hours a video game, whereas that person should be working in office and being productive. With all this data available to a central authority, right? With smart cities and all of that coming in, you have these digital chains. Then these are not your wearable watches; these are digital chains,
Chain
right?
is a good word.
Right, so I mean, everybody's getting tracked, and where you are, and then you have an alert, right? Imagine, I mean, it's a very scary situation, but imagine, the office guy sending, some people from your colleagues, like, oh, pick this guy up from the park, he's enjoying, and whereas he has to finish his work, right? I'm just saying a very hypothetical situation, but that, with the amount of data availability as of today and in the future with AI, right? uh, it can be a possibility, because in authoritarian companies or whatever, we all talk about community in Web3 and blockchain, and all those are fantastic use cases, but in reality there's a different side to it as well, right? So how do you handle that, Aditya, in that sense, like from a normal person perspective? We've been talking about policy, we've been talking about a bit of regulation from the government's point of view, and Christina's said some valid points, but how at a user level, right? How can I, one, control my data, and how can I protect myself? Because technology will not stop, right? Technology will only stop when everybody stops. Even if 10 people are building some new technology, it is bound to get traction. So at an individual level, what can a person do?
Yeah, it's tough because I recently went through losing a mobile phone, and one usually thinks it's your usual suspects. You call up your credit card companies, and that's it. But then I realized everything is so interlinked these days. Even your mutual funds, everything today in India works on OTP and works on all this two-factor authentication. So the minute
Yeah.
you lose your mobile phone and someone can clone it, they get access into everything. So it's pretty scary. On a personal level, I do think that it's important where you're putting in data and where you're saving data to the browser. Need to be mindful of that. But also at a corporate level, like what Dennis said, we shouldn't be saving customer data unless there's a need for, and if there is a need for, please disclose. So there's adequate amount of disclosure both to the platform and to the consumer that your data has been captured for this reason. And if you are for some reason saving data, anonymize, use everything that's possible in terms of making sure that the it's encrypted, it's not easily hackable. So these are some general rules of thumb that all of us follow. But what also happens on the flip side is that when you look at a large implementation, you're looking at a big corporate. Many times they're always late on a project, and sometimes they always think of this as an afterthought. So sometimes I've spoken to CIOs of really really big corporations where they say that what they say in conferences is very different from what actually happens. Many times the database administrator can just open up everything and look at everything there in an unencrypted format, because sometimes the backend team needs to look in that. And I think that also comes from a sense of responsibility that both the company and the teams that build these companies have to own, and they have to respect. And I think that's something that needs to be done because the data is growing at an enormous pace, and it's only going to get faster once generative AI comes in. So I think each one of us as either startup founders or as people or big corporates who are in charge of tech, we really need to readdress it, and take cognizance that even though there's a lot of catching up to be done, it's not just a matter of it being, us being morally correct. It's also a sense of responsibility, because you can't prevent a hack from happening, no matter who you are. And it can actually bring the stock price down and actually bring a company down, if you're not careful of things like this.
Yes. So I see that as a two pronged approach. What you said, just to summarize in two sentences. One is, you have to be take this as a responsibility, the data security for the, and then you have to take it as a moral responsibility as well, because while you're taking care of the data for the users, you are also data for somebody else, right? Eventually, there's no saying that I live in isolation and nobody can track me, and I'm hack proof, so to say, right? So those kind of preventions need to be done at all levels. Individuals, corporations, governments will obviously work and take their own time to kind of formulate, because they have a larger user base, right? A company have 1,000, 2,000, maybe a million users. But from a government point of view, any government, be that matter, and they also have to make sure that they don't stifle innovation at any country. All three of us or four of us are from different countries, right? And that's a challenge. And then you have to have these global networks. They have to seamlessly work with each other as well, right? Like, how do people work in GDPR with other countries? How do people go into sales? And same is with the other way. So this brings me to a point, with the data and the tracking and everything coming in, especially we are talking about metaverse and AI. So how can, as users and as platform creators, ensure, like, what actionable points, probably, two from each would help, that we can take as creators to make sure that metaverse and AI are, used for good betterment, for engagement, for living, for interaction, for entertainment, and not for harassment, bullying, and violence, right? To some extent. I mean, there were, when the metaverse started taking shape, there were some issues of people feeling uncomfortable, with the avatars, standing right next to each other, right? And that also stems from different cultures that we come, and the kind of environment we've had. So how do you think that people can do, deal with it, or they're doing it, Christina, from your take?
I think it needs to be a double layered approach. One is self regulating, which is
Mm-hmm.
more on the moral standard or ethical side, which is
Mm-hmm.
probably already being placed. But another side, I still feel quite strongly that regulation need to be in place. And I
Mm-hmm.
can give you one example. When I was doing my academic research on the Second Life, the world's first metaverse, which was created in 2003 by San Francisco-based company called Linden Lab, there is a lot of issues happening at that time. The first thing is a large number of people start to make many money inside the virtual world. And at that time, in Second Life, they have a Linden dollars, which is basically a stable coin linked with US dollars. So
Yeah.
when you try to create your virtual housing, virtual properties, virtual
Mm-hmm.
land, etc., you need to buy Linden dollars. And there are even millionaires created by purely selling virtual properties in Second Life. So initially, the U.S. government doesn't like uh, put any tax on income generated through Second Life, but then because it's generating huge amounts of economic impact, I think at its impact is about nearly 1 trillion US dollars a year. So that's massive. And then what happened is legislation started chipping in, and the
Mm-hmm.
government worldwide started to say, if you make any money in the metaverse, you need to pay tax, or else we will hunt you down. So it was
Okay.
insane, and I guess that it's already taking place, but maybe not on the tax front. So we perhaps need to do that on the ethical and safety side, and especially on like data privacy because it's so crucially important. And at the International Telecommunication Union, one of the key areas we're looking at is
Mm-hmm.
to ensure how to make metaverse really accessible. But to make it accessible, we need to get the data privacy right. It's absolutely crucial. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I also sometimes feel that, from a corporate side of point of view, that while trying to be innovative, while trying to make some money and have some funding and to solve an actual problem, they overlook, like maybe overlook, with intention, the requirement for data privacy, that because that could stifle certain amount of creativity, right? So they overlook it. I think that's where the government regulation needs to be there. But what usually happens is, again, Dennis, I'll take, ask your take here, that normally the regulation from the government point of view is usually responsive, that comes later, because innovation happens first, issues happen, then there is some hue and cry in certain cases, and then the regulations comes into the picture, understandably, because they have to do a regulation for every person in the country. But how, in your view, Dennis, how can that be done earlier? Or do you have an experience, or people reaching out in local governments and saying, let's make sure that people are safe, innovation happens, and then that's how we do it, like a public PPPP model, like what Christina said. People, public, partnership, and what is the 4P?
Public, private, people, and
Private.
partnership.
Partners. Ah, okay, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. So is that a model? Has that come to you from any stakeholder in the industry? That is.
So basically, the word is private, and the word is like basically the companies need to focus on having a standard. Usually, companies come together to have a common standard on how to interact, and are much more able and also agile in creating this kind of stuff, because governments are reactive by nature. They only come when you have the Sam Bankman-Fried of metaverse events, and then they will come in and say, "I told you so long ago," whatever, and in front of the cameras. But nobody cares right now. Like basically, everybody is just waiting for something to happen, and then saying, "Okay, yeah, I don't know." Like, no, we need to do something, because they're also afraid to overregulate, and they don't want to, be the ones to kill the baby in the bathtub. So it's just the companies having to come together and basically focusing on one standard, and that's always been the way. It's not metaverse, like with everything, internet, mobile phones. Somebody said, "Hey, like we've all these competing standards. Let's come together, have one standard, and let's have one standard on how to interact ethically as well." And like, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to have a direction, and just having a common direction already helps a lot.
Good point, Dennis. Having a common direction and kind of everybody kind of taking responsibility. It's a very, very hypothetical good case, like, but it doesn't really happen, right? So, and that's the reason why we have to come and at least start talking about it. So taking that a little further, Aditya, here's your point of view on how can we make sure that metaverse is accessible to everybody? Because what happens is, once it is accessible, people will ask questions, right? And when there are enough voices asking questions in terms of security or whichever way, and maybe just making sure that the metaverse is a much more seamless experience, when talking about NFTs and as part of metaverses. So how can we make sure that is accessible? I remember Christina made an open point, about hardware being available, the 5G signals, and all that. But at ground, what can be done today in what the resources are available currently?
Yeah, so I think AI does have a role to play here. So one good thing is that metaverse tends to be like an equalizer. So when you're in the metaverse, it's a graphical
Mhm.
simulation of you. So
Mhm.
you bring with it, an embodiment of yourself. So you could be from a fairly poor background without a great background, and then you're coming in and you're performing in the metaverse, and you once again you're doing a virtual concert or a virtual talk, and you're as equal as someone else with more resources. So that I always see the metaverse as an equalizing opportunity. But from a fairness and an opportunity standpoint, AI can help in, if I were to look at it, say a generative text box, right? And the generative text box inside the metaverse allowed me to generate art inside art gallery, virtual art gallery. Now I would like that the AI is allowing me to speak in any language. Very simple for AI to do, but that is not restrictive. It's not an English only kind of environment that I'm bringing. So it's Spanish, Hindi, Mandarin, any kind of language you speak in, because AI is not actually acting on the English It's actually translating the English into the LLM and then bringing back the results from the art gallery. So that's the kind of way in which you can make it inclusive. And a lot of people have said that platforms like Vision Pro will not be inclusive, but what one has to realize is that platforms of yesterday are data of today. So platforms of yesterday, which is like your Apple Photos, your Netflix, your Apple Plus, all of that is going to be available as a stream of data available inside Vision Pro. So people like my mom, my grandmom, who don't have avatars, they don't have any kind of apps, they don't have NFTs, they will be able to watch Netflix, they'll be able to see their grandchild's photograph in large scale, which means a lot to them. So they have ready content available. So there is inclusivity coming in, of course, at a price point. I do realize I'm very sensitive to the fact that $3,500 cannot be afforded by anyone. So is a MacBook Pro. But the idea is that they're looking at it from a inclusivity from a data availability standpoint. Some of them are looking at it by reducing the cost of the hardware and using the hardware as an entry point and using inclusivity from that point of view. We should also make sure that it's not restrictive in terms of language, it's not restrictive in terms of culture. Culturally, we're very different in how we conduct meetings, in how we present ourselves. So bringing in that multicultural lens to how the metaverse is designed, understanding how all of that is, I would say that that would make it truly welcoming. And of course then you bring in AI to make sure you're filtering hate speech, you're making sure that any kind of graphical generative AI you're pulling up is not offensive to someone else. I may want to do I may want to do a just out of academic interest, I may want to do some kind of art gallery which may be offensive to someone else, whether it's visually offensive or bringing back certain memories which are haunting to someone else. So that's the kind of level that AI can come in and filter it and say that would you like us to put a filter on top saying this is 18 and above, everyone has a choice whether they want to see this content or not. And all this is easily possible with AI. But building those guardrails in, not just building the guardrails in so that the NPC talks the language of the brand, but bringing these guardrails in to make sure that nothing is offensive is equal responsibility as well.
Yeah, so so this reminds me, your point is a very valid point, how you can be inclusive and responsive, and how AI can filter a lot of you know I would say hate speech and several other things. So there's a requirement which came to me, about a month back, a couple of months back. Somebody reached out that they want to recreate their old house, where their probably parents or grandparents live, because that person was very young and doesn't have many memories of that house, so they want to relive it, right? So I kind of turned that down on the point of view that it can be ethically wrong. You're feeling good about it, it's okay. But imagine, your parents, I mean, that person's parents looking at their parents, who passed away, say, about, long years ago, and there can be an emotional connect, right? And if for some reason, platform turns down or some issues happen, they can, this can lead to a trauma. So this was I thought it could be morally wrong, for me to kind of go and experience that, though it could also be the help also, right? Where I'm trying to help and probably relive. So it is a catch 22 situation. But I know I'm a morally right person, but going into the hands of fraudsters or scamsters, this can be used as a bait or a tool to have to kind of ask for money. So, Christina, I want to ask your point here about the social and the financial and the economic impact of these taking shape. They are taking shape. I may not do it; somebody else will, right? But so, what is the impact as a generic? And this will impact everybody, irrespective of what, which country you are in, what status you have in society, and everything. Christina.
Thank you. I think when we're talking about the general economic impact of metaverse as a sector, there are many different reports by different leading management consulting companies. So PwC, they predict the total value is at 1.5 trillion US dollars by 2030. And then McKinsey say it's 5 trillion US dollars, the same timeline. And I think the biggest feature, like lots of people would like to quote, is from Citigroup. So they're talking about between 8 to 13 trillion US dollars. And that's a lot of money. But the thing is, there is no clear definition of what really constitutes a metaverse. For some people, especially the general public who are not really into tech, they probably think metaverse is Meta Horizon world. So once Meta said, okay, maybe we lost a little bit too much money on Reality Labs, so we need to scale back a little bit and reposition ourselves, focusing on generative AI, because all the money is all pouring into generative AI now worldwide. So some people start to say metaverse is dead, which I find really entertaining because that's only a very small portion of the metaverse. Because if you're looking around, the whole metaverse ecosystem at this moment is generally three different key areas. One area is very much like a B2C, so we're looking at metaverse, which are catered to the needs of consumer, especially on the social entertainment side. So we have companies like Meta's Horizon World, we have Sandbox, we have Roblox and Decentraland, etc., who are play a very big part on that. But that part, as a result of high inflation rates worldwide and energy crisis, so consumers are scaling back, especially on entertainment related costs. If you're looking at the paid subscription from Netflix, they are also going down as a result during like the economic downturn. It's the same for the consumer side of metaverse. And another really big part is actually uh, enterprise metaverse. So that part is mainly to do with digital twin simulation, how they use like a digital model in the virtual world linked with real world IoT to constantly optimize real world like big projects, say smart cities, aerospace, like advanced manufacturing, like shipping, logistics chain, etc. This part is still quite solid, and I think the big player in the space, there are quite a few. I mean, like Nvidia is like doing a lot through its Omniverse like platform, and this side is quite solid, and there are a lot of user case. And I think the top two will be say BMW. They are using the whole Omniverse like digital twin to optimize. There are 31 factories worldwide employing more than 57 like thousand employees. So they're looking at how to use digital twin to support like virtual factory planning, like big data analysis, and how to collaborate between robotic and human because BMW is the world's largest like custom manufacturing. So that's quite important. Another side is actually metaverse for military and defense. So this side has been going on for quite a while, but without too much publicity. I mean, the US Army has been using metaverse for military training since 2017. And in the UK, we have a unicorn called Improbable, which are set up by two Cambridge-based graduates in 2012, and they already received more than 600 million US dollars funding, including SoftBank and some big player. And their main clients are actually simulation for defense purpose. So about like 20% of their 1,000 employees worldwide are defense experts using simulation. So if you're looking at the economic impact, I would say a lot of people are focusing on the consumer side, which is very much like gaming, esports, like social side, where the other two for the enterprise and for the military side is rarely discussed. So I say the biggest like economic impact in the longer term probably will be driving by the middle part, enterprise solution, as well as military, because they are actually having huge amount of investment coming in to develop the IT infrastructure, all the computing power, all the telecommunications, all the hardware, etc., to lay the
Hmm.
foundation of the whole metaverse ecosystem. And then once maybe, let's say, we can get the inflation hopefully sorted in the next one
Yes.
year or two, that side will come back again. And this side is going to explode very quickly. Yeah. So it's going to be very interesting moving forward.
Interesting. So interesting insights you gave. So today work with enterprises, tomorrow work with consumers, right? Is what I understood. As a broader statement,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
I think so. Because, I mean, there is currently the metaverse is still evolving really fast. And if
Yes.
we add in the AI element into the whole metaverse discussion, because a lot of people, especially in the Web3 or metaverse community worldwide, it's sad to say, AI is taking away all the oxygen away from metaverse or Web3. That's
Yes.
perhaps there are some truths about it, but maybe it's only entering. If you're having a look closely enough, you will start to see many of the generative AIs, they are just not only focusing on like text prompt give you perfect answer about what to eat tonight in terms of recipe, or like give you a beautiful like 3D image or video. It starts to become text to 3D objects, which
Yes.
is crucial to metaverse development. Because imagine if I just put in a text and saying, give me a new avatar. I want a realistic avatar, and that can be done in like several hours. That would be amazing. So that's a basic building block of the virtual world of metaverse. It can be avatar, it can be digital assets, it can be virtual property, it can be virtual cities, anything you name it. And there are already quite a few like applications which are developed. I mean, Google has the String Fusion, which they launched in October last year. So they can
Hmm.
allow you to input the text and then they give you a lower resolution, like 3D object in about 1 hour, 20 minutes. And in January this year, we have NVIDIA. They have this Magic 3D model, which they can produce high resolution, like text to 3D in half the time of Google. That only takes 3 months. And then last month, we see NVIDIA came out with this really interesting model where for any non-player, role in computer games, they can now use generative AI to give you personalized interaction, almost make you feel like we are entering the world of Western world, like the TV series. So things are moving extremely fast. And I think like 2 weeks ago, we have a new program basically allow you to input a short like 2D video and it will automatically generate 3D virtual environment. So I think now is the time that things are moving too fast. That a lot of things which you feel it will only taking place in the next 10 years, they are literally taking place now. So I would say instead of saying AI is killing Web3 or
Hmm.
Metaverse, it's actually going to be the fastest like accelerator to help our dream to come true, which is amazing.
Fantastic. I think that's a very valid point. You mentioned about certain platforms. So there's Luma AI, Leonardo, and several others. Taking shape every now and then. We keep hearing which are going to enable, right? So I want to have say maybe a couple of statements on this last question, and then we'll have a couple of questions from Nicole in the comment, and we'll take those and then wrap it up. Because I know we could talk about hours about it, but in mindful of time for everybody, right? So I think one is that what needs to be addressed, like in terms of challenges, to make this metaverse plus AI combination so that it can reach its full potential. Like quick comments. We'll start with Dennis here.
So basically, let's start with something that people don't think about.
Hmm.
Iteration of 3D models. Like
Hmm.
the metaverse we associate with, that we have in our imagination always has an avatar in it. So
Hmm.
theoretically, you can just have a black box. You just use up all your old CAD data that you have just lying around that didn't do anything with. You just throw it into that space and say, "Hey, make it new, make it better," and just Google toroidal propeller. Yeah. If you've ever seen the new kind of propellers that are better than the others, and then have like twice the output, that kind of stuff comes from AI and metaverse, iterations. So we have so many things where I will just help us, like putting stuff into the metaverse, automation, everything, so like it's going to be there and it's going to help us, actually be faster. And Christina said something that is really, really important, like enterprise stuff, basically, I always call it ICE, industrial, consumer, enterprise, right? Like, and the industrial and enterprise part is like probably 90%. And at the tip of the iceberg is just like basically what we see, which is like saying social media is the whole internet, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing. And another point will be what Aditya mentioned. inclusivity, because of AI translating. Like we have an AI partnership that we basically have in the metaverse, where you can have 250 different languages and subtitles. So somebody speaks, and in real time you will see the subtitles, which is fantastic, because that brings us closer together. And a lot of companies at the enterprise level, they actually want to hold these standards up high, that are DE&I, and ESG standards. And if you can, like, everything that has a three-letter acronym, like CSR, whatever, companies are like, oh yeah, we can use it for that. Okay, yeah, let's go. So yeah, that's like, AI will help with everything and anything with that, like, and just, I think the translation barrier, it's a huge one for international companies, and that's one of the first major use cases that actually companies will actually use in at the enterprise level.
Fantastic. Good point. Aditya, your take on this.
Yeah. So are we talking about AI being a mega enabler in the vision of the metaverse?
Yeah, so we're talking about, like what challenges need to be addressed for metaverse plus AI combination to reach its full potential.
Yeah. So, we've had the power of translation AI present inside chatbot. So many times when you're chatting with a corporate chat client, and the person on the other side cannot really understand your language, but you're chatting in English, you're getting the response back. Actually, the AI behind the scenes, which is translating it into
Mhm.
the person behind. So that can happen in real time, like Dennis said. So, when you walk into a virtual store and you have either an NPC who's present as a salesperson, because you can't have a salesperson driving an avatar 24/7. So you can have an NPC, you can give them the guide rails, and it can do a real time translation, and not just translation based on, like what Dennis said, that as you're speaking, it'll transcribe that. It'll quickly convert that into whatever language it's used to speak from the generative AI and respond back to you. All of that can be done today, or that can lead to a very inclusive environment by being generally present in all languages. We need to be really mindful of the guardrails we give this AI. So it's not just about the AI chatbot being talking about the brand, but how it's going to deal with offensive kind of questions, offensive kind of things. So you don't want anything provocative, which is going to lead to some kind of emotional trauma, or something that'll make news for the wrong reason. So all of that should be brought in terms of guardrails, not just most people today, when they talk to you about making a chatbot on brand, where basically they're saying feed it all the details about the brand, so that after 2 questions it brings you back about a product, about the brand. That's important for sales, but you want to make sure that all these emotional and social guardrails are built in as well. And like I mentioned earlier, anything offensive should be either it should be just censored, or you should give the consumer a choice at every point, that hey, this is something that could be offensive. Would you like to go ahead and experience this, or would you like to ignore this? So these are just general. I really feel like what Dr. Christina said, that AI is given us the superpower that we needed. So it's like giving jet fuel to a lawnmower. So you
Yeah.
can do a lot with it, but you need to give it in small doses to make sure we
Uh,
can.
I was going to say, like the NOS in the, the Fast and Furious
Exactly.
series. It's
Yeah.
like that, right? So,
And you
so
need to
Dennis says
control it.
that, absolutely. So Dennis says that, we need to make sure that, the language barrier needs to be removed. Aditya says, filtration of content. Christina, what do you think? Like one point, quick one point there.
I think it's really important to looking at the intellectual property
Mhm.
issues on anything to do with generative AI and the metaverse, because we know that when generative AI is being trained, they need huge amounts of information.
Yes.
And at this moment, there is a little bit like a controversy about how to really share the IP, because when they are trained using massive amount of like information available on the internet,
Hmm.
actually the commercial interest is not really shared with the producer of those existing information. So that's why some publishers, especially academic database or some of the like information holders, they are
Mhm.
looking at the legal dispute with some of the big players of generative AI related tech company. So that need to be addressed. Another side I think is how we're really looking at the IP ownership between different parts involving the whole supply chain of generative AI. I mean, one
Mhm.
typical question we normally discuss is who should really own the IP? Let's say if I use Mid Journey or other kind of like platform to create an image, does the
Mhm.
IP belong to me or does that like IP belongs to the AI, generative AI platform, which allow this image to be produced? Or does this image should be partly belongs to like the many thousands or tens of thousands images, the original creators who has had their work to be fed into this generative AI platform to create such beautiful masterpiece? I think it's still quite a really important area to debate, and also with a lot of issues on singularity. Let's assume in the future when the intelligence of machine exceeds the intelligence of human, which some scholars already argue that's literally taking place as we speak now. So if I am the AI, and as Dr. Geoffrey Hinter said in one of his interviews in MIT, his biggest concern is when one AI learns a new skill, he can share that knowledge and skill with another 10,000 AI fellows instantly. And we human
Yes.
beings, we do not have that kind of capacity. That's why he's really, really worried to the point he will resign from Google to set the alarm for all of us. Say, we need to address this. So I guess if I'm an AI and I was mandated to create like a IP for some human beings, maybe I would say, why do I want to share my own IP with human beings? I should have 100% of the IP because it's my work, it's my baby. I don't want any human beings to have it. And then we start to have a huge debate about what's the IP rights of AI and what's the IP rights of humans. And there is actually a case, I think, there is a photographer or like one artist, he submits a piece of art to a very prestigious international competition, and in the end he won the champion. He refused to accept it because he said this art is created by AI, not me. So that's going to happen more and more often. How are we going to ensure this is properly dealt with for the benefit of AI and also humans, or we're coming together? So that would be hugely interesting to look at in the future.
Wow, fantastic. So you've left us with few questions so that we can go on with another hour, right? These are awesome points to leave, right? And, I just want to take, this one point which Nicole mentioned. It says that, whose rules will the AI work off, like something similar to what you said, Christina, with cultural differences and rights and tolerances and several other IPs and, ownerships. And there were challenges as well, right? I think unfortunately, we I was loving, having this discussion forward, but we've already 1 hour plus, right? So I want to stop this here. So thank you so much again, all of you, for coming in. So one sentence, like, what do you think, in a personal opinion, is the future of AI plus metaverse combination? We'll start with Dennis. He's been sitting for a long time. Let's hear him, right?
I think where is it not is the question.
Interesting. That's another question for another round of talks. You and I can have later time. Aditya, what about you?
Yeah, I think they say the metaverse is basically a combination of AI, XR, and blockchain. So basically, blockchain lets you take it away, XR lets you experience it, AI lets you generate it at scale, right? So AI is basically going to become invisible. We're going to call it automation. We're going to call it digital because
Uh-huh.
we don't really specify algorithms. We don't specify computation. We just say
Mhm.
it's digital. So I feel that the whole world, AI is going to pervade everywhere and everything's going to be AI. So it's going to become invisible. And the metaverse will be driven by it because, we can't do digital, scale on a universal scale without automation. And I think that's what's going to happen.
Fantastic point. Christina, your one sentence on the future of metaverse plus AI combination.
I think there is going to be lots of resistance on any kind of like technology adoption at scale. So what we really need to focusing on is looking at those real world user case which can bring business more opportunities to flourish when it comes to commercial revenues, when it comes to social impact, when it comes to help to make our human society better and prosperous. I think that will be the way forward. And I wouldn't mind AI in the future. They taking care of how to cook delicious meal for me every day. I like that kind of automation. And also, I think AI, if we utilize it for personalized support on a daily basis, maybe every single one of us can enjoy something like Tony Stark in Marvel Studio. He has his personal AI, which is protecting him 24/7 and helping to deal with daily work life and make his life much easier and happier. So why not?
Yes, and with that, we obviously could not talk one other point, which was very important in terms of all this is good, like helping others and growing industry technology. What is the human, side effect of all this growth with AI taking over, in terms of jobs and all? But yeah, I think that's for another time. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining in. Christina, Aditya, Dennis, and thank you, viewers. I think we had tons of comments from a lot of people, and Nicole kind of had a very very good interaction. Thank you so much, Nicole, for joining in. And yeah, so I had actually thought that this would be the wrap up of the Metaverse Marathon that we were looking at. I was doing, but I have got a very couple of days back a very very interesting project in Metaverse about mental health, which we are covering. It's a startup with two PhD students from IITs in India. So I'm going to be covering that in 9:30 p.m. today. But anyhow, thank you so much, everybody, for joining in this Metaverse Marathon. Thank you so much, Christina, Aditya, and Dennis again. It was lovely. Bye bye. Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much.
Bye bye.
See you.
Have a nice
Bye.
Thank
day.
you.
You too. Bye.